Today on the Big 3 and 30, Georgia gets the top running back in the 2027 class.
We're having a pipeline of PA recently of just hits after hits after hits.
Quarterback Joey Aguilar sues the NCAA for eligibility.
Joey Aguilar suing the NCAA, taking the NCAA to court here in Knox County.
And Kansas basketball beats Texas Tech for another win.
To find a way to win this game, finishing on an 8-0 run.
This is the Big 3 and 30 College, the three biggest stories on campus from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The Big 3 and 30 College starts now. Thank you for making the Big 3 and 30 your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The transfer portal is still in high gear in college football, but don't forget about those high school recruits too. Georgia landed the top running back in the class of 2027, and Locked On Bulldogs tells you what he'll bring to the backfield.
The big news of the day. Spell all the way up from PA. We're having a pipeline of PA recently of just hits after hits after hits. Comes on down. It includes a big weekend on campus at Georgia, snow covered and all, and decides, you know what? I want to go to RBU. Comes on over, commits to Georgia when everybody was saying Penn State was the lock. Everybody said, no, Penn State's it. He's going there. Nope. He comes on down to Georgia. Let's first talk about what you see about Spell, the prospect on film. What stands out to you the most when you watch this kid?
Well, it's kind of nice to see a little bit more of that Pennsylvania pipeline coming down with DeAndre Swift and that look too. But what I think we see from Spell is I have the ability to look at a kid and be able to see his dimensions, his specs, because you have these kids that are really built well up top. They're real skinny down low. They don't have very good swivel in their hips. They don't have the ability to change direction. The first thing you see on film, there's a reason why he's the number one running back in the nation, number 3 nationally, number one running back, but number 3 nationally in the 2027 class, is the general fact his center of gravity is perfect. He's got a great lower body that allows him to move very well because he's obviously got top line speed and can run away from people. But his strength is something that you look and see on film that's very impressive. For him to be able to lower his head and run over people, even at the high school level, is impressive. But be able to put his foot in the ground, change direction, and then not really lose that speed. That's something that's very impressive to me. But you look at his upper body. Sometimes you'll have a running back that has a larger torso with shorter legs, and that changes their center of gravity. What he, to me, fits is a spec that not a lot of running backs have. And to me, he's going to be one of the most special running backs we have seen specimen-wise, probably since just the overall physicality of what Nick Chubb brought to us and the way he's built and the way he carries himself. I don't really say that necessarily he's going to fit the same profile as Nick Chubb, but I like what I see in just his overall vision, his speed, his power, his cutting ability. He brings it all to the table.
I'm so glad you said that. We're going to talk about one of the favorite things that I saw on film, and his speed and size and strength. They're all there, but those are important. You have to have those to play running back. I'm actually more impressed with some of the things you just mentioned, and it makes sense to me. I loved, by the way, Maurice Jones-Drew back in the day. Maurice Jones-Drew was just this little fire hydrant of a running back, and his center of gravity, his ability to get through the line. Everybody looked at this kid, and I'm not talking about the off-field stuff, people, so don't get at me for that. I'm talking about in the game. He had this low center of gravity that was really, really incredible. It was so hard to bring down, and it didn't matter. He played up because he had complete control of his body in running and changing directions. You mentioned that he has physicality standpoint, the Nick Chubb, and I'm so glad that you caveat. We're not talking about even style of run nor productivity. We're just talking about composition of a kid coming in. I really like that. If you look at him right now, depending on the recruiting service, 5'9", 5'10", 205, he's got just a spectacular. Yes, like if I were to say, hey, go make a running back in a lab, coach, this is what you'd come back with.
Yeah, and people don't, that's not hyperbole either, Clint. I really feel like that he fits a profile where you see his top part of his body absolutely built perfectly, not too big, not too thick, got a strong enough body where he can lower the head, able, to swivel inside, especially gap running. And his lower body is proportional to, I know a lot of people say, are you kidding me? You're actually comparing his lower body to his upper body torso. That ratio is very important. If you want to have a low center of gravity that's natural, that has the ability to cut in space and move without having having to topple over because you're top heavy. And, you know, and then the ability, like I said, with his overall strength, it's like taking yourself and run into a fire hydrant. And that's what I feel like you see in him. That's the reason why I kind of compared that composition to Nick Chubb, just built solid.
All the way through, and you see it not only it's easy. Oh gosh, it's not easy. I shouldn't say that. It's easier when you're man up in the hole and guys coming down. You could see them coming, and you're going to prepare yourself. You're going to get ready. It's a lot harder to take those quick hits from somebody else coming in at an angle, which is why angle and tackling is so important. And for him to bounce off those or to run through those with contact, that's that composition you're talking about. The muscle, the ability, the balance to take hits unforeseen, don't know they're coming, and yet still keep going with the relative same speed through the hole.
You would see there's many kids that I've analyzed over the years running the football to naturally multitask when you run. You don't think that that's something that someone can do, but when you have the ability to have the vision to see the hole, but keep your eyes up and be able to take on somebody that's trying to get to you, shed the block, change speed, move in a different direction, all simultaneously happening at the same time. And, you know, he shows on film too that he is definitely willing to punish you if you do get in his way as well. I love that he put in there a couple of plays where, man, he's at the end zone about to go over the goal line, and kid tries to challenge him, and he just says, you know, welcome to this game, brother. And he basically baptizes him in the way that you don't want to be baptized on film. So
that's right.
Very nice.
I loved as well. This kid's running back through and through, one of the top recruits there. But on his highlight film, he put in strong safety film where he was coming up and licking guys, and he's excited for that. You see him get up, and this is one of the things I love what he brings to the table. Honestly, when you play for Kirby Smart, you have to love football. If you only love one aspect of football, good luck. You're not going to make it at Georgia. You're not going to make it in the NFL. This is what Kirby is saying. This kid loves every single aspect of the game. So when he makes a big hit on defense and he stops a team from getting a first down, he celebrates. He doesn't think, well, it's not a 6-yard, 7-yard average game. I didn't go for 150 and 2 tuds. No, this kid loves it. And he loves the physicality aspect at that size. It's incredible. One of the other things, and I want to touch on this before we go. You said vision. Coach, it's my number one thing when I look at running backs. Garrison Hurst and Frank Gore are two of my favorite all-time running backs. And the reason why is because their vision. They had physicality. Talk about Frank Gore. He's about the same size combination that we're talking about, Spell. The vision to know and to set up, to pause, to slow before you get there. It's not a downhill sprint. I think Zeus was really good physically, but he was sprinting 24/7 without the play developing. And that was his only drawback. He has incredible vision for his age, I think.
Yeah, it's natural instincts too. That just like you mentioned on defense, when you watch a kid play defense, like I watch his eyes, I watched his feet and how he backpedals into position, baiting a quarterback to throw on the few defensive plays that he has. That's nice to show on defense when you're an offensive recruit because it shows instinct. And that's something that I'm sorry. You make a good coach great when you have players. I had a kid that went and played for Virginia Tech that my first year coaching as a defensive back. His name was Dorian Porch. He was our quarterback as well as a secondary cornerback. Went to play at Virginia Tech, played right beside Cam Chancellor at Virginia Tech. He made me look so good as a defensive back coach because I could teach him technique and fundamentals. I was growing to learn as a young coach as well, but he was naturally instinctive and someone that just made you look better than what you were because he was just a ball player. And that's what I see in him. And obviously why he's definitely at the top of the list and the number one running back in the nation.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, that's just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 College. We have another lawsuit in college football. Tennessee quarterback Joey Aguilar has sued the NCAA over eligibility, and Eric Kane breaks down the situation on Locked On Vols.
Joey Aguilar suing the NCAA, taking the NCAA to court here in Knox County, and why I believe this is a good move for Joey Aguilar, in my expert legal opinion. Rolls eyes, but I do think this gives him more options. We'll get into that here in segment number 1, the possibilities that he could win this thing and he could be Tennessee's starting quarterback in 2026. Mailbag questions coming up in segment 2. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll check in with Alex Dono of Locked On Hurricanes on Jadaeus Richard, Tennessee's cornerback from the Miami Hurricanes in the transfer portal. All that and more coming up later on in the show here in segment number 3. Appreciate you guys as always, making Locked On Vols a part of your morning routine, your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, what is your team every single day, the number one sports podcasting network, and everydayers couldn't do this show without you. Join the Everydayer Club, $5 a month. You get an ad-free audio version of the show, access to the Locked On merch store, access to the Locked On Everydayer Discord channel. We can get in there and talk in a group chat. That is lockedonvols.supercast.com, lockedonvols.supercast.com, just $5 to join the Everydayer Club. All right, so Adam Sparks of Knox News had the report on Monday afternoon, did a really good job of breaking some things down. Of course, that's been out there in the public for about 12 hours now or so. Probably a little bit more by the time you're listening to this. So does a really good job of breaking down kind of what all this means. Essentially, Joey Aguilar is suing the NCAA. Well, again, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert in legal jargon. I'm an expert in how all this goes about. I've covered 2 legal cases at the University of Tennessee the last couple of years. I haven't really played point person on this one. So I get the language a little bit, but I am far from an expert in terms of how this is all going to go. Again, I've said this numerous times. If I could go back in all my years in schooling, because I was there forever, and if I could take some legal classes, common law, stuff like that, I would in a heartbeat, because we're seeing this more and more in the industry nowadays. But I have seen some cases, and I kind of understand the basis of what's going on, but I am far from an expert, so I'm not trying to be that. I'm just getting that out there in the open right now. Joey Aguilar is suing the NCAA, taking them to court. And you probably thought, well, he's already doing that, right? Here's the difference. Joey Aguilar was a part of Diego Pavia's lawsuit against the NCAA. He was a plaintiff in that suit. He was one of about 25, 26 other players in his position trying to get the NCAA to negate the JUCO years against him, not to allow those junior college years to count against their NCAA eligibility. Well, why does this matter nowadays? Of course, it means that you can play another year, but also it means even more nowadays because you can get another year of rev share. You have another year to profit off your name, image, and likeness. And let's be completely frank here, guys. People like Nico Iamaleava, players like Nico Iamaleava, and those like him in terms of in that ballpark of older, out of eligibility, might latch on to an NFL training camp of some sorts. Take Zakai Ziegler, for example. He's the perfect example. That's why he was trying to continue to sue and try to get back in the game as much as he could last year, because you're never going to make as much money playing this sport ever again. You might get a training camp, you might get a tryout here and there, but Joey Aguilar is likely never going to make as much money as he made playing at the University of Tennessee ever again. And so if there's another year to profit off that, you're going to do everything in your power to do just that. I don't blame him whatsoever for doing that. I don't blame Diego Pavia, whose blanket waiver allowed Joey Aguilar, Miles Kitzelman, Star Thomas, Trinidad Chambliss, and all these other guys around the league and around the country to play another year of eligibility. I don't blame these guys whatsoever. Again, I went on a tangent last week and I talked about Charles Bediako, and we'll bring him up here in just a moment. Overall thoughts on this, my opinion, it's not good for the game. But I don't blame these guys for trying. Also, there's a big-time difference in what Trinidad Chambliss is trying to do at Ole Miss compared to Joey Aguilar at Tennessee. What Joey Aguilar is doing at Tennessee, what Charles Bediako's already done at the University of Alabama. They're all different. And the outlier here is Bediako has literally played professional basketball and is coming back to college. To me, again, amateurism's out the window, but to me, if there's ever a line in the sand, Bediako was past it, and he's come back and crossed that line in the sand. Again, he's the only one in this whole situation that has literally played professional sports and is coming back to college. There's been reports out there of a former NBA player that is trying to come back to college now. And you knew it was all you knew it was going to happen sooner or later, right? When Bediako did what he did, what the Baylor kid did, what they did. Again, Bediako is different from the former G League players that are playing in college basketball right now because, to my knowledge, again, Charles Bediako is the only one that played in college, left, and has now come back. And now you got a former NBA player trying to do the same thing that's still within that window. Basketball is pushing that boundary, right? Baseball could benefit from it the most, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that another day. Back to Joey Aguilar and all that. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, he's already suing the NCAA, right? Well, he's been a part of a plaintiff of Diego Pavia's lawsuit. He voluntarily asked to get out of that about a week ago. They did. They granted his release. He hired a lawyer, and that lawyer that he hired, I'm blanking on his name. I've got it right here. He hired a lawyer, Cam Harris, to represent him. Cam Harris has already beaten the NCAA when they came after Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava a couple years ago. So Tennessee has a good relationship with Cam Harris already, but he's already beaten the NCAA in a couple of different cases, most notably the one with Nico Iamaleava just a couple of years ago. So the reason he's doing this is just to give himself another option. You've seen Trinidad Chambliss, and he's set for a preliminary injunction hearing on February the 12th with a court in Oxford, okay? You saw Charles Bediako, and I made jokes about it all last week, but the judge/booster or whatever that heard his case, that was in Tuscaloosa, okay? So putting it here in Knoxville, I'm not saying that the judge is a Tennessee fan or anything, or a Tennessee booster or anything. I'm not saying that, but you have a better chance of winning this locally than you do going into federal court. It makes all the sense in the world. Trinidad Chambliss has not officially gotten the green light yet, but gosh, I don't know how anybody can feel confident about what's going to come from the court systems, but everybody is just assuming Trinidad's going to be back playing for Ole Miss next year, which it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit. But anyway, everyone's just assuming that that's going to be the case. So you have a better chance of winning at a local level than you do in federal court, in my opinion. Adam Sparks puts into his story from the court documents, says, quote, if the court granted Aguilar relief from the NCAA's JUCO rule in the near term, Tennessee has a spot for him on the roster and would welcome him back. His compensation for playing college football in 2026 would be approximately $2 million, which would be about right. That would be a step up from what he made this year, which was around $1.2 million for Aguilar. The complaint also says that Aguilar needs to know now. He needs relief now to know whether or not he should report to spring practice or prepare for the NFL draft. He is currently not enrolled in classes, but Tennessee does do a midterm enrollee, midterm session, which is what Edwin Spillman and Caleb Beasley did a couple years ago when they arrived on campus the 1st of March, took a class, and they were ready to go for spring practice. Joey Aguilar could do something like that if there's some resolution here pretty soon. So they're fighting this at the local level, and according to the complaint, you're fighting this in the Knox County Court because, quote, the cause of the action arose here where Aguilar played football, seeks to play football again, and suffers injuries from the NCAA's unlawful conduct. Again, this is going back saying, like, hey, I couldn't profit off my name, image, and likeness when I was in junior college. I could profit off my name, image, and likeness when I was in NCAA member-instituted programs, which is where I was, Aguilar, at Appalachian State for 2 years, the semester of UCLA, and then, of course, here at Tennessee last year. So that's kind of what he's doing right now. Now, here's the difference, and Adam does a really good job of breaking this down in his report yesterday. Since he's no longer a part of the Diego Pavia lawsuit, remember, Diego Pavia is not going to play college football no matter what. It's just him and his legal team are leading the charge. They're not bound together whatsoever. So there's a preliminary injunction hearing for that case on February the 10th. If it is denied, that doesn't mean that Aguilar is going to be denied as well. If it is granted, that would mean Aguilar is not included in that because he's no longer a plaintiff. However, there would probably be another blanket waiver that would take care of Aguilar and other players like them, just like last year when the blanket waiver allowed against Star Thomas, Joey Aguilar, and other players as well to continue to play. Miles Kitzelman and other players around the around the country to play. So if Pavia's team wins its preliminary injunction hearing on February the 10th, it won't necessarily mean that Aguilar is good to go, but that's a really good sign, and a blanket waiver would probably follow, right? Or something along those lines. If it's denied, well, Aguilar is going to going by himself to try to get that injunction. Really, he's going to get a TRO, but ultimately he wants to get a preliminary injunction hearing that will allow him to be eligible to play in 2026. So if Pavia's case is denied, it's okay, because, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a good thing, but you've got Joey Aguilar that's doing his own thing. If it's granted, well, that's a really good thing, because in a roundabout way, Aguilar is going to be covered there as well. So I think this just gives you more options. I don't necessarily believe that it means like he's a shoo-in that he's going to be eligible. I don't really think it means one way or the other. I just think it means you're getting more options. And I do believe that doing it on the local level makes a whole lot more sense than doing it in federal court. So that's my opinion. Trying to talk about things I don't fully understand, and I'm not trying to act like an expert, so please don't believe I'm trying to be an expert on this topic, but that's kind of where I stand on that, and we will see what comes of this. But you knew it was coming whenever he got out of the Diego Pavia complaint last week, when he hired his own lawyer. You knew he was going to take NCAA to court on his own lawsuit at some point, and ultimately Adam Sparks reported that was going to happen on Monday. So we'll see about what date that is for the hearing and all that, but it's notable. Joey Aguilar is trying to play football again for sure, trying to make more money, and obviously I don't have to even say what that means and what that changes in regards to Tennessee football's offensive outlook for the 2026 season. Of course, that's obviously a conversation for another day.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 3 and 30 College. The Kansas Jayhawks picked up their second straight ranked win last night, beating number 13 Texas Tech in Lubbock down the wire. Locked On Jayhawks host Derek Johnson recaps the win.
So this was a game that definitely you could tell Kansas was a more tired team. I mean, both teams played on Saturday, though I guess you could say KU was a little later in the day, but I think it more had to do with the energy that KU got up to and the level of execution and shot making against BYU. It was just hard to replicate that, and to find a way to win this game, finishing on an 8-0 run. I don't know. It was kind of a weird game where the first half, first of all, we get the surprise that Christian Anderson's not going to go. And then you go from Kansas being a 4.5 point underdog coming into the game to all of a sudden, okay, maybe they should win this game without Christian Anderson. And it's kind of a back and forth first half. It felt like both teams at halftime were in a position where, for Texas Tech, they could argue, hey, we have no Christian Anderson. We got 2 fouls on top. And the fact that we're, within 3 is a good thing. For KU, you could have argued, Peterson at halftime is only 3 of 10, and feels like they've had too many turnovers and haven't gotten the offense going. And even despite that, they're up 3 points. And then Texas Tech goes on that big run to start the second half. And it felt like there were a couple kill shots in there that Tech just barely missed. And then it allowed KU to kind of find a bit of an opening, creep it back to within 7, creep it to within 5, creep it to within 3. And then eventually it was Darren Peterson, who did not score in the second half until the final 2 minutes or whatever it was, minute of the game. He hits back-to-back threes. Both of them, the first one was an even tougher shot. I mean, the insanity of hitting that over top and kind of fading back into the corner, incredible shot making. The second one was just incredible transition play that like he has made look easy so far this season. And, for Peterson, 5 of 14, one of his least efficient games of the season, ends up being one of his most notable because of how it finished for KU. Just what a finish in this game. And this is a gigantic win. It keeps the momentum going. It keeps the win streak going for KU. It puts them in a position now where I talked a lot about this. When you look at BYU and Texas Tech, those are two other teams that are going to be contending with you in this top, 6 or so of the Big 12. And it is really important for Kansas, in my estimation, to get a top 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament. One, because if you're a top 4 seed in the Big 12, it probably means you had a great season and you have an opportunity to go do good things. But it also means that you would get a double bye in the Big 12 tournament. And with some of the injuries and with some of the Darren Peterson stuff we've seen, getting a double bye would be very beneficial to KU. And so now you have the tiebreaker head-to-head against BYU and Texas Tech should it come up, because that's the only time you play both these teams this season. So a massive 2-game swing for KU, and overall just this win streak in general for KU as you get ready to play next week. Obviously you still have Utah later this week, but you still get ready next week to play, two of the best teams in the country. Banking some of these wins now becomes gigantic for KU. Now, some of the biggest positives of this game, Darren Peterson finishing the game, it's funny because it really does get coupled. Him finishing the game is what led to him hitting those late shots. And the idea that I don't know, it felt like in some other games in the past, if KU was down 10 points, he was coming out and we don't know if we were going to see him again. He stayed in there for the long haul, and it wound up being the difference in this one, right? Donovan Atwell had an excellent game defensively for Texas Tech, and it felt like KU maybe abandoned trying to get Peterson, a bunch of shots more than they probably should have when you have a guy who can make some of those shots we saw. But it wasn't really his night. Atwell was playing well defensively, and you kind of get into a situation where you're relying on others, but then they got him to the point that he needed to get, and he kind of took over. So it was a double moment. One, you see the clutchness of this dude, and two, you get him to finish a game, which hasn't happened a ton for KU this year. And now he has, basically hit. The TCU game is a little different with how it happened. It's not a game winner, but him getting fouled and making the 3 free throws allowed KU to later win the game. That is a 2-game swing right there outside of just his normal contributions to the team. So gigantic there. I would also say in general, Melvin Council continues to be a stud for KU on the road. 16 points, 7 of 13, 7 rebounds. He was so good with his floater game in this one, and he continues to be, honestly, KU's most consistent player on the road this season has been Melvin Council, and that kind of continued in this game as well. I thought Flory had a solid game for KU, 14 points, 9 rebounds, get some blocks in there, went over on his point total over under, so thank you to Cash in that one for Flory. So those are all positives. I thought in general, another positive I would point to, KU's 2-point defense was excellent in this game. Now, 3-point defense left something to be desired for a little bit there. It actually finished okay. Tech hit 12 threes, but it was 30%. But the 2-point defense for KU, they went 12 of 40 from 3. They were 11 of 32 from 2 when they had the Big 12 Player of the Year, JT Toppin. So that was actually an incredible 2-point defensive game for KU. Now, if we are going to poke at some of the big negatives here that we were going to have to talk about up until the final, couple minutes of this game, the offense for the most part was not great for KU, which is weird because I'm looking at the stats right now and I'm like, oh, they shot 45% from the field. It did not feel that way for KU. I think part of it was because the 3-point shooting, they were, up until Darren Peterson hits those last 2 threes, they were 4 of 18 from 3. So the threes weren't falling. You're seeing Tech hit a bunch of threes. That made it feel not as good. You saw KU turn the ball over 15 times. What was supposed to be an advantage for KU getting the ball in the post wound up leading to just a bunch of turnovers in this game. That's kind of the big thing. 15 turnovers. This was a lower possession game. Tech plays at a slower tempo. So in a higher possession game, that could have been an even higher number. And it felt like Tech kind of packed the paint and at times kind of said, hey, we're going to put the pressure on the official and see what they call. And, I think that was a good strategy for them. And KU wound up, struggling offensively for a majority of the game. And then I would say the other big negative in this one for KU, the defensive rebounding continues to be a problem. We saw it cost them the game against Utah or against UConn. It has been a problem in some of the games they've lost. It's been a problem in some of the games they've won. They were able to overcome it here. And it's something that, again, like you hope that doesn't come up in March, but 14 offensive rebounds for Texas Tech compared to just 5 for KU. That was an issue for Kansas tonight. And then you almost give away the game late, but I guess at the end of the day, a win is a win. And, Darren Peterson getting it done, I think, makes it even more satisfying in a way from the standpoint of like the Texas Tech fans, what they were chanting. If you don't know what they were chanting in the game, I probably can't say it on here. I don't want to get in trouble, but you can probably look it up. And basically it was challenging Darren Peterson. Let's just put it that way. And, that makes it a little bit more sweet, right? And that's part of this too. Like going back to the beach, I know I'm focusing on this again, but I guess in general too, you say, I know Marco wasn't very good tonight, but in general, after Saturday, not knowing the availability of Marco and Peterson coming into this game, the fact that you wound up, being able to even play Marco Jackson was obviously a good sign. Like I said, tonight was not a great game for Marco, but in general this season, he's had some games where he's given KU a lift and has been a pretty good defender. Again, not as much the case tonight, but, although he still ended up a +2 on the plus minus. But Darren Peterson gives you 35 minutes in this one. And it's not just that he finished the game and what he did, but like this was 35 minutes for Peterson on the road when you're traveling after short rest from the BYU game. And now you get extra rest before the Utah game. And I think the hope would be for Kansas, like take advantage of that one so he gets to play less minutes for the following game against Arizona. But man, what a win that I'm still kind of scratching my head about in the most positive way for how the heck did KU do it? Because with the defensive rebound struggling at times, with Tech going off for threes at times, with a couple calls that maybe didn't go their way, with Peterson struggling and not scoring to those last couple buckets, with Trey White almost giving the ball away a couple times at the end there. I guess he did give the ball away, but almost giving the game away there at the end. Like, I'm like, how did they win this game? But at the end of the day, like I said, any road win you can get, let alone against a good opponent, even with them being out without one of their best players and one of the best players in the call, you take it and you run back to Lawrence, Kansas, and you're happy eating that W.
That's all for today's Big 3 in 30 College. If you follow pro basketball or football, the Big 3 in 30 has shows for the biggest news in the NBA and the NFL going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA or the Big 3 in 30 NFL, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 3 in 30 College.